Lila. See my council therapy dog. Let's see, there we go. Lila.
All right, Mayor.
Oh, look.
We're ready.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this special meeting of the Lake Oswego City Council. We are now called to order. Ms. Linder, will you please call the roll?
Mayor Buck.
Here.
Councilors Rapp.
Here.
Boop.
Here.
Mans.
Here.
Wynn.
Here.
Wendland.
Here.
And Burdick.
Here.
Okay, great.
Okay, and if everyone would please mute and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And we're here today to have a study session on the wastewater treatment plant, and we're grateful to have so many of you here to help bring the council up to date on this project. Thank you all for taking the time, and I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Bennett to start things off.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Mayor and City Councilors. I think, as you recall, beginning in December of 2018, the city of Lake Oswego began exploring whether we should invest in upgrading of the existing wastewater treatment plant at Tryon Creek that's owned and operated by the city of Portland, of which we are a customer, or whether we should explore the possibility of a replacement plant. And for a variety of reasons, our thought was that we would partner with a private investor to actually build and operate the plant. Anthony's going to cover a lot of what's happened since there in his report, but on May 4th, we're going to come back to you with a draft contract, essentially, to take the next step and to take the next step towards replacing the existing plant with a privately built and operated plant that the city of Lake Oswego would own as opposed to the city of Portland. We've been doing a lot of work with many of you, and I know many of you have had a chance to tour the existing plant. And on one of the tours, one of you asked a question that I thought I would sort of answer now, which for me frames the rest of the presentation. One of you asked, why would anyone in Lake Oswego who's a customer care about whether we replace the plant or not? And so I changed that, of course, to why is this project important for Lake Oswego as a community? I came up with 4 basic reasons. I thought it was 5, but I scratched one of them out. 4. One is that we could significantly reduce the amount of land that our wastewater treatment plant occupies. We can go from around 12 or 13 acres to about 6 acres. And so we can actually shrink this facility to a smaller site. The second is we can be a better neighbor. If you were at the plant, you know that there are noises and there are smells from the plant that really affect the livability of this part of Lake Oswego. And sometimes if you're in town, depending on which direction the wind is blowing, you'll know that it can be unpleasant to be in Foothills Park or in downtown based on what's happening at the plant. The third reason is we can deliver a more environmentally responsible product. That is, when we treat this wastewater, we can put it back into the Willamette River in a way that's more environmentally responsible than we're doing now. And then last but not least, we can reclaim the area of Lake Oswego that's immediately adjacent to the Willamette River. And we can do all of this for essentially the same cost as investing in the existing plant. So those are the reasons why I think you might care as a member of the community. We've had a great partnership. Although the first time Michael Jordan and I talked about this, I was like, I don't know why the city would do this. And so I'm really happy that Michael's never held those original words that I had against me. But we've had a great partner in the city of Portland. And so I now want to hand it over to Michael Jordan, who's the director of the Bureau of Environmental Services, to offer his thoughts about why we might want to do this. Thanks, Michael.
Thank you, Martha, and Mr. Mayor, City Council, thanks for allowing me to be here today. I've always respected Martha, and I even respected her more after that meeting because those were my exact thoughts the first time I heard the idea too. I said, this doesn't make any sense at all. However, that was 3 or 4 years ago that I first started with this conversation. And through refinement of our discussions at the city regarding the Tryon Creek plant and its future, regarding the challenges of upgrading that plant, which is now old, let's just say, and in need of nearly a top to bottom refurbishment. And in our refinement of the cost estimates around that work, we believed that the process of a public-private partnership was worth pursuing. And so we went about doing the due diligence of putting together what the cost issues might be and what was kind of the envelope of possibility from a cost perspective over the next 30 years for both communities. And we put together, I say we were a minor player in this work, and I will eventually thank Anthony for his leadership on this. But the RFP that was put together, quite frankly, is one of the best, most thorough pieces of work that I've seen for a major infrastructure project in my tenure. And I think what goes to that is that after the award was not challenged. This is an RFP that is literally worth hundreds of millions of dollars over the next 30 years. And it is seldom you see a procurement that elaborate, that complex, and worth that much money that doesn't get challenged. And that really goes to the thoroughness of the work, the team that Anthony has put together staff-wise and outside counsel and help-wise. I've sat through now, I don't know, Anthony, I've sat through hours of meetings with these folks over months and months and months. And I've never seen a group more impressive regarding this kind of a procurement than the staffing and consulting help that you've got. Our city council approved an interim intergovernmental agreement to proceed with this last July unanimously. They are fully aware of the process and the advantages to the city of Portland for this to be successful. Now, having said all of that, and Anthony's going to talk about this more in depth, we're entering into a period that is now really an intense due diligence period. And there is still an opportunity for both cities to evaluate the efficacy of the project over the next year plus. And so I'm just here to tell you the city of Portland is still on board as a partner. We believe that this project, if successful, is to the advantage of both communities. It really doesn't make a lot of sense for Portland to own and operate a wastewater treatment facility inside the city of Lake Oswego. We are also now, from a flow perspective, the minority partner in the project. But I just want to say what a pleasure it's been to work with your staff and the folks they've assembled. I, quite frankly, like Martha, was a complete skeptic when I first started this process. And I have to say, going through all the due diligence to get through the RFP and see the proposals, I'm incredibly impressed with EPCOR's ability to deliver on this project. And so through the due diligence, we'll see. But I'm just here to tell you that Portland is fully on board as a partner and would be happy later on to answer any questions you might have. And my job now is to hand it over to Anthony for what will be the guts of the presentation. So Anthony, go for it.
I just want to start by saying thank you, Mike. I really appreciate the very kind words, and I appreciate your partnership. I've been just impressed with your entire team as well, and just the collaboration that we've had. And this has really been an equal partnership, I felt, the whole way through. And I know you're a very, very busy man, but you made yourself available to almost all of our meetings, and we have one weekly. And so I just thank you for the time that you've given to this project. I truly appreciate it.
Thank you.
So I would like to right now to recognize my team and kind of go through each person that is here on this call to let you have a sense of who's there. So let's start with the first person that I see, which is Kyle Rohrer. He is a Vice President of Utility Advisory Services for Kroll Engineers, and he'll be available to answer any technical questions that you have. I also have Dan Lafitte. He is the Vice president's, or he is the project manager / associate vice president for Kroll Engineers as well. And then I would like to recognize Jill Jameson. She is the CEO of Illuminati Infrastructure Advisors. And also, I would say a topmost expert in P3 financing and structuring deals. In fact, whenever Congress needs somebody to testify on that type of particular thing, they call her to come do that. So I'd also like to recognize on this call, Lee Ward. He is a senior manager for EPCOR Commercial Services, and he'll give a presentation later on. We also have with EPCOR the vice president, Daniel Baylet. And we're very happy to have them here. They can answer some of your detailed questions about their partnership. They are our selected P3 partner on this deal, public-private partnership. And then, of course, Erica Rooney, city engineer, who you all know, and Evan Boone has been absolutely involved the whole way and has given a lot of time, and actually all of our staff has given just a tremendous amount of time. And Evan has been great this whole process, and so is Erica. And then I would like to, let's see, I don't have on this call Rick Saper, but I want to mention his name. He is a partner at Hawkins, Delafield and Wood, and been absolutely critical as part of this too. I didn't think we needed to have an attorney here. If I'm wrong, then I can bring him at the next meeting that we have if you have really detailed legal questions that Evan can answer, but I think Evan could probably handle most of them. All right, with that said, I hope I didn't miss anybody. I don't think that I did. Oh, I do want to take this time actually to recognize Councillor Winland. Councillor Winland has been involved in our RFP process, including on the helping us during the evaluation period. He sat in on countless meetings. I think you probably donated, lots and lots of hours. I probably couldn't even guess how many hours that you donated towards this project. And he sat in when we had clarification meetings with each of the bidders and had interviews with them, and sat in giving his perspective as we were going through the evaluation process. He didn't actually score, but he was critical in asking very thoughtful questions of our bidders, and also in giving a perspective from council as a kind of a liaison for us. And it was I gotta say it was great working with you, Councilor Winland, and I really appreciate your help on this project. Okay, with that said, let's just jump into the PowerPoint, and you're going to actually see 3 PowerPoints, although we will keep each of them brief. One is going to be from me, one is going to be from Jill Jameson, and then you're going to have one from EPCOR. Lee Ward will give that presentation. So let me go ahead and share my screen, and here we go. All right, so let's go ahead and start the slideshow. And I'm going to see if I can swap. Here we go. All right, here we go. All right, so here's kind of a roadmap of what we're going to go over during this. So I did introductions to team members. Now I'm going to talk about the past work, big picture, the possible location of the new plant, cost, and then our outreach efforts are upcoming. And then and then I'm also and I'm going to talk about them in really broad strokes. And then I'm going to hand it over to Joe Jameson, who's going to talk about the progressive process and the P3 delivery structure. And then Lee Ward of EPCOR is going to go into details about some of the technology and what they're going to offer to us. And then we'll have a closing statement, and I'll ask for additional questions. I want to encourage the council to ask any questions of any of the team members I introduced as I'm going through this. Let's make this a free-form conversation. Don't worry about interrupting me. It's really okay. And also keep in mind that the city of Portland, that Mike Jordan will be here to 4. So if you have questions from the city of Portland's perspective, please ask them early on, even during this presentation. Okay, so I want to talk about where we've been, and we've had a long journey. Actually, the council approved moving forward with the P3 procurement process back in December of 2018. And so that's quite a ways away. And even before that, as Mike Jordan mentioned, is that there was some preliminary work that we did even before that, including we did a feasibility study that came in June of 2018 that basically said that we believe that it would be the same cost or less of a cost to build a new plant than to upgrade the existing one, which we still believe that statement to be true as far as the overall cost of the project to be less. So with that, we moved forward and we ended up coming and doing a request for qualifications in February of 2019. And we then shortlisted 3 bidders. We had four teams of firms that submitted, and we shortened it down to 3. And then we, from there, we had a council study session in March 2019 to kind of go over the details. We ended up actually adding a bunch of team members at that point, including we added legal services. So we added Hawkins, Delafield, and Wood. And then we also got Crowell Engineers on board a little bit after that. And then at that point, the city of Portland actually placed a hold on upgrading their existing plant in May of 2019 for us to focus on this project. And then we, in January of 2020, council gave us some funding, $450,000 to continue to move forward with all the consulting work we needed to do. We actually came to council in June, or actually in July, to get your approval for an interim IGA with the city of Portland, which we have in place currently, and that governs all the work that we're going to do with EPCOR in the next 14 months. So that we do have a structure in place, and basically a lot of the structure is splitting things 50-50 and being very cooperative. So the consulting costs, splitting those costs, and if the project is off-ramped, then they would also split those costs as well. And I'll talk about that a little bit more, what that means in a moment. And then also in July, FCS came and did a rate study. And what basically they did is they took the payments that we need to get to Portland to upgrade the existing plants, and they plugged that into our rate model, and it said that we need to raise rates about 3.9%. But keep in mind, that's just one moment in time. It doesn't take into consideration anything that can happen outside the scope of this project, but that was our baseline, and it is what we are basing our current rate increases on, and at this point for the next year. And so basically, as Martha said at the very top, that the cost of this project and the impacts to ratepayers needs to be the same as it would under the existing scenario. So and that's how we've actually created our payment schedule to the public-private partners, and we've structured everything along those lines, and that's where we get this thing called an affordability threshold, which actually Joe Jameson will talk about in a little bit more detail a little bit later. So once again, the idea of this is that it's going to be cost neutral to our residents of going to a new plant. And I would kind of encourage you to think of it kind of similarly to what you did with City Hall, is that City Hall, you had a choice to either upgrade and refurbish the existing City Hall, but it came out that it was being more expensive to do so. And it's sounding like it's the same thing in this situation. So you ended up building a brand new one, which is just now being opened up. And that's kind of the same kind of decision point that you have here. To kind of bring us to where we're at, we actually had a few other study sessions. We actually also came to council about last November, and you gave me some more funding for us to spend in order to get to this point, and gave us kind of the go ahead to do our procurement process, our request for proposals. And we ultimately got 2 proposals that came in, and we had a scoring committee that included 2 members from City of Portland, including Mike Jordan, and we unanimously scored EPCOR as being the winning bidder by a significant margin. And we have also started to enter into negotiations with them on terms for these preliminary services. And I'm happy to say that we're basically at the finish line. We're just doing a little bit of wordsmithing, and it's been actually a very collaborative and thoughtful and quite frankly very easy negotiation, in my opinion. And it just shows that I believe that EPCOR and us are very aligned, and we're very collaborative in nature and also oriented towards problem solving as a team. So that kind of brings us up to speed of where we're at now. So with that, I want to just talk about kind of the big picture overview of what we're trying to do. So once again, there isn't a do nothing option. The choices are either upgrade the existing plant or build new. And the upgrade of the existing plants was estimated at about $130 million worth of upgrades they need to do in the near term, the next 10 years, plus a lot of upgrades in the future as well beyond that. And or once again, we could go through a public-private partnership, and they would finance it, they would build it, design it, and then operate and maintain it. And once again, it would require them to kind of front load some of the money for us in order for this to make this work. But we structured the deal, and I think it will work. Once again, no rate differences between the options, and EPCOR would operate and maintain for 30 years. This would mean that currently the Tryon Creek Wastewater Treatment Plant is owned and operated by the City of Portland. This would mean that now the ownership transfers to Lake Oswego under a new plant. We'd be the owner. We'd be, however, leasing it to EPCOR for them to operate and maintain for a 30-year period of time. At the end of that, then we would get the opportunity to take back ownership and also to operate and maintain it if we wanted to, or we can negotiate a further deal beyond that. Another detail that I think is important to mention is that part of our interim agreement with Portland stipulated that Portland would give us the existing property of about it's somewhere around 12.6 acres of property right along the Willamette River for $1. However, we would need to demolish the old plant and remediate the soil. That would be honest to do. As one thing that we've asked EPCOR to do as part of their investigatory work is to price that out for us. So before we have to ultimately make a decision on whether or not to proceed into the next phase in construction, we will know, kind of have an idea of what those costs will be, and we can ask EPCOR to actually do the work for us, or we could bid it out. We have that choice. But I think we felt it was important to kind of have an idea of what that would be. The tricky part is that when you remediate soil, usually do it to a certain level for development, and we don't know what kind of development would be there. So that is a tricky part to this, but we can get a ballpark of cost through this process. I would also like briefly to talk about the potential location of the new plant. So once again, here's a map that shows where the Portland Tryon Creek Wastewater Treatment Plant is, and with the Willamette River next to it, and then you got Foothills Park next to it. There really isn't a lot of choices of land that we could use. We need about 6 acres in order to make this work. And this 3 properties very neatly make up what we need in order for this project to have for it to be built. And once again, we have to be able to treat wastewater treatment while we're building. We have to have somewhere it goes. So there will be a point in time where we're actually operating both plants almost simultaneously while it's being commissioned and being tested. This location is one that EPCOR has said that is a good one for them, and also it's advantageous because it's close to a lot of the infrastructure that's needed in order for it to work, including like the outfall and that type of thing. I should pause here for any questions before I keep going. Okay. All right, so here's a task and timeline. So once again, we're going to come back to you on May 4th, and we're going to ask for you to allow for us to enter into a preliminary services agreement with EPCOR. Now, this service period will last about 14 months, and it includes them doing a variety of things. The first task they're going to do is that they're going to actually go through and develop the project scope. They're going to do a basis of design. They're going to do a lot of work and they're also going to do geotechnical environmental work as well on the properties that I showed you a map of the location of where they could be, and try to figure out if that's the right site. With this, a lot of the work they're going to do is us getting ready to submit for a permit application through the Oregon Department of Environmental Quality, DEQ. And so they're doing a lot of early work for that. And so we will come back to council October 2021 for a study session to show all the work that they did to accomplish all this, and then kind of get your feedback of where we're at, and also this is a potential spot if you wanted to cancel a project that you could. However, I don't think there'll be enough information to really have a good feel of whether or not we meet thresholds not for financial definitively until we get to about 30% design. That gives us a lot more information, and that's in January 2022. At that point, we'll have quite a lot of information and a lot of information for making decisions long term. And so that's going to be a very key meeting in the future. And then once we get to 60% submittal, we will be able to get definitive pricing. We will actually, that's the point of really the decision to move forward into starting to purchase land, starting to actually begin towards construction. I mean, this is the point of where this is the green light the project is going with at this point. When I say all this, though, I want you to know that this meeting coming up on May 4th is very important, because that is a meeting where we are going down this road toward this project. So we are basically at a very important time in this project where we are taking that really first step. And there is going to be some money that is that the city of Lake Oswego and Portland will be on the hook for. So let's talk about that, because I think that's a very important piece of this. So for all the services and all the design work that that EPCOR is going to do, and once again, it's going to be very specific to us, and it's going to be customized to us, and it's going to be starting from the beginning. They're going to incur a lot of costs, and we're going to pay them to do that work for us as if we were hiring them, because that's what we're doing. We're hiring them to do a lot of work for us this period of time. And by the way, they're not making a lot of money off of this. This is really they're doing this work with the hope that this project happens. I mean, that's the point of it. And so, but I want to make sure to pull your attention to it. So this table that I'm showing you, the very first one, is based upon if the council decides that it's going to terminate for convenience, like at your own will, that you decide that you want to terminate this project, you have the ability to. But this is the cost that we would likely be need to reimburse EPCOR for the work they've done up to these milestone points. So once again, that meeting in October 2021, Lake Oswego will be on the hook for about $1.34 million of reimbursing them for all the design work and all the work that they've done to that point. When it gets to January 2022, we are on the hook for about $2.4 million. And then July of 2022, it'd be about 3.8 million. And once again, the context of how the determination happens matters a lot, and this is kind of like what I'm showing as worst case scenario. There's lots of situations that could have a less of a cost, but I think I need to show you that first. And then once again, Portland is sharing a lot of those costs. So from this point forward, up to this point, consulting costs have cost us about $60,000 per month. A lot of that being legal, over half of that being legal. Once we get into this phase of the project, however, it's going to shift to a lot of the costs being engineering costs, because we're going to need to hire a construction engineering firm to be able to do construction review oversight and design oversight and that kind of thing. Basically act as our owner's rep for this project. And so the cost overall of all the consulting will go up to about $100,000, with the majority of that being engineering oversight again. And so I have those costs figured in. So basically every month is $100,000. So that's how you get these numbers that are shown up here. And so I want to just, once again, show what the consulting cost, kind of the sunk cost would be for us to continue this project forward to July of 2022 as well. And then
Anthony, before you leave that, though, that includes what we've spent to date as well. Yes.
No, it doesn't.
It doesn't.
So this slide here has project cost to date, which is about $1 million, and then Portland is responsible for reimbursing LO for about 1.4 million. So,
Anthony.
Yeah, you're yes, Mayor.
Well, go ahead. Do you want to finish your thought?
Actually, I apologize. It does include what we spent year to date. Yeah.
in terms of the timing of this, come completion of the 30%, and given the 2-year process it will take for DEQ. So are we moving forward during that 2-year period while we're waiting for approval from DEQ and incurring additional costs, not knowing whether or not it will be approved?
Yes, we will. And so there's going to be a lot of things that are going to go in tandem. And actually, Jill Jameson has a diagram that will show all the things that are going to happen kind of in tandem with one another and the timing of those things. But the answer is yes. We will start the ball rolling shortly after we get past October and getting that task 1. We need a bunch of things done for that submittal to DEQ. And that basis of design review that they're going to do during this period is a huge one for that, for us to submit to DEQ. Once we submit, DEQ, like you said, has said it's about a 2-year process. We would like to try to see if we can expedite that, but I don't know if we can. But we can do a lot of things in the meantime as we keep that ball rolling. And we can, but yes. Did I answer your question?
Well, yes, but so what's the risk that we move the process down the road, but DEQ doesn't approve the permit?
So let me ask somebody from my team to speak to that. Maybe Crollo Engineers.
Yeah, thank you, Anthony. I can speak to that. Mayor, it is a risk. The technology is EPCOR is going to be carrying 2 technologies forward. The Aqua technology is a little less established in North America, but one of the things that we did through the discussion process with them and the proposal review process was emphasize the importance of that. And so EPCOR brought onto their team a permitting specialist that's got experience in the Northwest, specifically in Oregon, and working with DEQ to helpfully ensure that that process is successful. But as Anthony said, it is a risk, but EPCOR's brought team members onto the team to be able to help mitigate that.
This Kyle Rorick role, I'll just add to that as a reminder that EPCOR is bringing 2 technologies forward during the first 30 days for consideration. One of them is very well proven and familiar to folks like Oregon DEQ. And, while there are no guarantees, it would be pretty surprising if DEQ would not approve, frankly, either of these technologies. It's just more a matter of demonstration of the newer technology that EPCOR is going to talk about a little bit later. It's less risk of DEQ flat out not approving. It's more a matter of what do they need to be comfortable with, frankly, either technology.
And I should note that we will, once we have EPCOR on board, if we get approval to move forward, we will engage DEQ and have a conversation with them up front. And also, Mike Jordan has been very gracious in offering us resources in the city of Portland, and they have experts on permitting. Amanda Haney is one person that has been involved in this project so far. And once again, we'll be able to leverage the expertise in moving forward with DEQ as well.
Thank you.
Very excellent question. Councilor Wendland?
Oh. And we should all know that we'd have to go through this process with the old plant if we decide not to do this. And that's risky because we're delinquent now in having a DEQ permit that's up to date. Is that correct? So,
yeah, yes.
So I think it would be even harder to get a DEQ permit on an old on an old car that we have in the old sewer plant than it would be to get it on the new plant.
That's an excellent point, Councilor. Any other questions on this? I'm kind of looking at screens. Okay. All right. So let's move on. And I would like to apologize for misspeaking earlier. City Manager Bennett was absolutely 100% correct. This does include the costs that we spent up to this point. Sorry for misspeaking and saying it doesn't, because it does for the estimated consultant costs. And then this is an aggregated estimate of the cost for the project up to this point. So this is basically those 2 tables added together. And once again, this is worst case scenario. There's a lot of mitigating circumstances that could change how much we'd actually have to pay out if the project is canceled. If the project does move forward, though, these costs get rolled into the overall financing, and EPCOR ends up paying for these costs as part of the overall project. Except for the consulting costs, those costs are we've been paying them as we go. So potentially. So I'd like to move on to the next slide, which is communication outreach. And we're still in the early phases of developing our communication strategy, and we want to do that in collaboration with EPCOR. Actually, Assistant to the City Manager, Madison Thiesing, has been very helpful in the early stages of this. And she's been in touch with her counterpart at EPCOR and having these early conversations. We don't want to go too far until we actually have EPCOR on board, but we're kind of queuing all this up the best that we can. And we would like to have a robust effort on this. Keep in mind that we have 14 months worth of due diligence work ahead of us, and during that time, we will have designs and lots of things that will come out, and we want to be able to share this information. So it includes giving a steady stream of information to all of you as we're going. So not just waiting until we get to study sessions, but giving you information prior to that as we get information, and then also sharing with Portland's leadership. And then we want to leverage, all our tools that we have available to us at social media and publications. We would also like to engage a bunch of community leaders and special interest stakeholders. And there's already some groups that are forming, and I already have some meetings set up with some of them. But we want to make that a little more robust, a lot more robust, actually, as we start entering into the next phase. We want to, as we get facility design work, we want to reach out to neighborhood, surrounding neighborhood, and to talk about the designs. And then once again, I think part of the strategy is to talk about, this project. One of the key drivers of it is being a better neighbor. So smaller footprint, odor control, visually appealing, and then having an environmental commitment through updated DEQ compliance as well. So that completes my side of the presentation. If there's, I'll pause here for any questions before I turn it over to Jill Jamison, who will then share her screen and will also give a presentation as well. So let me go ahead and stop sharing this. Any questions to what I've shared so far? There'll be, of course, more time after we're done with the presentation to ask as many questions you want as well. All right, without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to Jill Jamison.
Thank you very much, Anthony. Can you hear me okay? Can you see my screen?
Yes, it's great.
Okay, I'm trying to get a slide. So thank you very much, Mayor, council members, city manager. It's a pleasure to be with you. I don't want to date myself, but as others were talking about when this project started, I actually began before that. So I think my first visit you guys was in the middle of the summer of 2018, as these issues were starting to percolate. And one of the first questions were, what are the options for addressing something where we don't know if we want to proceed? And so in many respects, born from that was this discussion of sort of an alternative path, which we call the progressive design, build, finance, operate, maintain. I'll try not to be too redundant, but I guess in a study session, a little redundance is to be expected. Since the beginning, the drivers and objectives have been clearly established. I like to think of them as sort of the compass point that we've been following since day one on this project. And it has really been to give you an option. So it's not only Lake Oswego, it's the entire nation that is sort of at a crossroads right now with aging infrastructure. And there's a decision, do I reinvest in Jurassic technology and try to keep it afloat, or do I look to the future, maybe invest in something that's more modern, forward-looking, and particularly better aligned for future environmental requirements? And I think you're at that crossroad. You're having the discussions that are happening across the nation at this point in time. And with that in mind, I asked the question at the beginning, what are we after with this project? And this is where the objectives were laid out, right? The desire to invest in this, but being respectful of ratepayers. There was no desire to increase rates above what they would otherwise be if the existing plant existed. So that's where we came up with the affordability threshold. tie payments to the overall performance of the asset. Instead of issuing bonds today, building it, and then figuring out in the future how you're going to pay for renovations, et cetera, thinking of another way of doing it so that you can ensure that you're only paying for an asset that's performing at the standards that you want it to be at, and also to maintain that over time. Obviously, as the city manager and Anthony have both said, looking for a smaller, better neighbor, smaller footprint, et cetera, that allows you to recapture a valuable waterfront, which is very important, right? And what the city decides to do that in the future is up to you. But the ability to take back the waterfront and create a better environment for your community is also very important. And obviously, with this in mind, achieve the earliest possible date of operations. And that's for a number of reasons. To Councilor Wendland's point, your NPDES permit is expired, right? And so to make sure that you can get a system that is up to standard, but also to avoid the replication or duplication of investment. There's a need to invest right now in Triangle Creek if that's going to be the long-term solution. So to make this decision quickly so that you can move in one direction and the other, as opposed to needing to do both for a long time. Achieve reliable operations, effective maintenance, and what we often talk about is maximizing value for money, right? Biggest bang for the buck in terms of public investment into these projects. So with those objectives in mind, back in 2019, this project began with an RFQ process, and then we went into the RFP process. The general scope has been consistent from day one. It includes the design, the construction, the financing, the operation and maintenance of a new wastewater treatment facility that would replace the existing Triangle Creek and meet the same flows and requirements, obviously to newer standards in terms of environmental quality. The project will need to secure all the NPDES permits for the outflow. That's absolutely necessary, and that's part of what was looked at very closely. To the question, the mayor's question, as a progressive nature of this project, and I'll show you a graphic here in a second, usually at about the 30% design level, you start to know whether your permitting authorities are okay or not with this, right? It's not that they wait to the last day and say, oh no, it's a collaborative process. And so there's going to be a lot of opportunities before the final date to be able to pivot, to off-ramp, to do all kinds of things. This entire process was designed to provide the city with absolute protection in terms of decision making once you get better information. But that doesn't mean you have to wait until the end. I think we're going to have a pretty good idea, probably the 30%, whether or not the affordability threshold is achievable. Permitting 30 or to 60%, we'll know a lot at that point in time, because the idea is that there'll be a lot of interaction with the permitting authorities. On top of that, residuals management, right? So you guys deal with the trucks going back and forth. What does this look like in the future? Do we need to pivot to something in Class A facilities? We don't know, but that needs to be investigated as well. And to Anthony's point about the demolition of the existing facility, if you proceed, we have no idea what the environmental situation is with that property and whether it would require remediation or not. So part of what we're doing is investigating that so that we can put price tags on those sorts of things, so that at some point you can make that decision, right? It's easy to say, I don't like it now, but truly we don't have perfect information. So the process was designed in a way to slowly expose the information to allow you to make the decision in a fully informed manner. And for those who have not been around this for the last 3 years or 4 years, it's not unusual process, but it is not traditional, right? We do this quite frequently, and basically you can divide the entire project into two pieces. The first piece is a preliminary services period, which is what we're talking about today. And the second piece is, if you decide to go forward, would be the delivery period, where they would finalize the designs and construct and then operate it for a long time. You have plenty of time to make that decision, right? That's a long-term commitment. The preliminary services period is about 2 years, give or take. It could be a little less, it could be a little more, depending on ODEQ, but actually July of 2022, so it's a little less than 2 years. The preliminary services period is where they will do, I listened to Anthony, and as good engineers will do, he stressed all the engineering parts of it, but I'd like to stress the other work that they're also doing. So they will be doing design development, they'll be doing investigations, geotech, but also structuring the finances for this. They'll be doing cost estimating, they'll be doing additional investigations, as I said, that we're going to require. So there's a lot of work that goes on in this. Included in that period will be the negotiation of the final agreement if you go forward with the preliminary services. So again, when you get to this off-ramp or proceed decision, you know the terms and conditions of the deal, you know the financing terms, you know everything so that you can make a fully informed decision. The idea is that right now, look, we're at less than 15% designs. Some people will tell you it's possible, some will tell you it's not possible to get within the affordability threshold. You really don't know until you get to about the 60%. Otherwise, there are just lots of contingencies in there. So there's going to be a firm fixed price submission at about the 60% level. They're compelled to that. If they go over, that's on them. But that will be the decision that you make or that will be the price point that you make your decision on. The preliminary services, you are not outlaying any money during the preliminary services period unless you decide to terminate the contract. So they're floating this, right? So your budget is not going to see outflows during the preliminary services period unless you terminate. And so they're going to float this themselves. You would typically hire a consultant and you pay them as you go on a pay-go basis. In this case, they're doing it at risk. And I mean at risk because in some circumstances, if you decide not to proceed, for instance, if it's for cause, because they come back to you at the 30% level and say, look, we don't think we can get within the affordability threshold, they don't get reimbursed 100% for the costs they put in. There's a penalty. So they're very incentivized to make sure that they can work this. So it's very different in that regard, that you pay out only if there's a termination. If you proceed with a project for the delivery period, then all of those costs are rolled into the 30-year payments that you make. So they're amortized over 30 years and they become quite negligible. The idea is that there would be a construction period followed by a 30-year services period following the acceptance of work, and the ownership, as we've said before, would be with Lake Oswego. Important in this as well, just for those who are not familiar with these sort of arrangements, during the delivery period, they're paid on the basis of performance. So if the facility is not working to the standards that we prescribe in the agreement, there are deductions to the payment. So you would withhold some of the payment that you would owe them for having them finance this. So they're incentivized as well to perform. We also will set out the handover residual life requirements. We don't want you getting back in 30 years an asset that is in disrepair, right? So require them to invest as we go so that at the end you get back a useful asset that might have a 30-year term or a 15-year term, whatever it may be. So it's a very well thought out process that allows for life cycle maintenance and management of the facility. That said, I think we should focus probably more on what you can see in the very near future. And this graphic obviously is a bit of an eye chart, but I think it is probably the most informative graphic that we've put together on this. And I'll start from the left and go to the right. So this is a graduated process. And by that, I mean, there are many opportunities for you to off-ramp if we do not think that this is going to work. If we decide if you decide at the basis of design level or at the 30% level that you think that the affordability threshold is not going to be met, ODEQ is playing hardball and they're like, we're never going to approve any new permits, stick with trying. Any of that sort of information, you have the opportunity to off-ramp and cut your losses and run. But at that point, you've actually developed criteria that would allow you to do that. Right now, we just don't have the criteria. It's too early in the process. So we've gone through a procurement process, as I said, that began in January of 2019 with the RFQ that finalized in April with the award to EPCOR. Within that procurement process, I just want to be clear, we had them bid on definitive terms of the project, of the preliminary services agreement. So there hasn't been a lot of ex post negotiation. It's just really been incorporating the terms of the proposal in there. To Anthony's point, it's been a very, very cordial event because there's really nothing to disagree on because they agreed to the terms before they deliver the proposal, which is always our preferred approach. You don't want that ex post negotiation if you can avoid it. Should you proceed with this project and in May we go forward, then you can kind of see, I don't know how well you can see, the schedule on the top. They will be required to deliver the basis of design by September, or actually it's August of 2021. The idea is that Anthony will go back to you and to give you an update on where this is. As you will see when EPCOR speaks, they didn't just provide one option in terms of technology, they provided two. And so During this basis of design period, there's going to be a little bit of vetting of those processes, some discussions with ODEQ about what the processes would be with Aqua Nareda and the others. But they'll come in at that point with probably a 15% design, more definitive pricing than they already have right now, as well as some advancement in permitting, cost development, schedule development, and those sorts of things. In January of 2022, we would be looking at the 30% design package. And I think that's usually when you would start submitting things to ODEQ for the review and approval. You're going to start to get a good sense at that point. Is this a go? Is this a no-go? Are there schedule risks inherent in it? So if ODEQ requires a demonstration project for the Aqua Nareda, which is possible, is that going to delay the schedule? What's the schedule impact, et cetera? During this time as well, I would fully expect that that EPCOR together with the city would also start submitting applications for things like WIFIA loans, which is a federal concessionary loan program at Treasury rates. That would be great for this project because of the wonky way that the affordability threshold is set out. So they'll be doing financing, they'll be doing cost estimating, permitting, et cetera, et cetera. May of 2022, we're at the 60% design. So that's really in a year, right? So that's a pretty quick development of this. Again, during this entire process, they're going to be working with ODEQ, with you guys, with cost development, schedule development. You're going to have very good information at that point in terms of A, the affordability threshold, B, any permitting risks and schedule risks. We'll also have good information with regard to the sites and the soils and those sorts of things. So at that point, if it doesn't look viable, you can off-ramp, you can terminate, you can do those sorts of things. Shortly thereafter, they would give you the definitive project submittal, which also includes committed financing. So it would have the entire financing structure, locked in interest rates, all of those good things, so that you would be able to know exactly what the price is on an annual basis for the next 30 years. Should you proceed, they'll finalize designs and construction and then move on to the testing and commissioning, followed obviously by the operations period. Should you decide to off-ramp at that point, depending on the reasons for the off-ramp, there could be some compensation. But you will be the owner of all of the designs, you'll be the owner of all of the information. So it's not that they're just doing a study and then maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. You're also going to be developing, I think, really good information on this. Again, the affordability cap is really the fundamental item that we're looking at, but there are other things as well. Certainly things like schedule, ODEQ, and those sorts of things will also be looked at. So there's a different schedule. The pricing changes depending on when you off-ramp and the triggers for that, but I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. Again, I just want to reiterate this because I think that there might be a little bit of confusion in terms of what the scope of services are. When we're looking at the preliminary services, again, they're going to progressively develop the design package, including site analysis, et cetera, ultimately to about a 60-65% for the definitive. They're going to be securing the permits as they go. That doesn't mean they wait till the last minute. Obviously, they'll be in contact with ODEQ. The city will be involved. This is not a handoff, it's a partnership. So there'll be a lot of information back and forth. They'll develop a schedule that they will be committed to. So they can't start the project and then say, look, I need another 10 years in order to do construction. They have a very aggressive construction schedule that would actually deliver this in 2024, which is much ahead of where we had expected it to be. They'll develop cost estimates in an open book manner, right? So that's another thing. We want visibility into what the costing is going to look like so that it'll result in a firm fixed price at the end. The financing plan, again, is going to be defined so that we all know what it is and what the implications of it might be. Undertaking other studies as well, demolition and remediation. They'll do the environmental study to see what it's going to cost to demolish and, let's say, reconfigure, or I guess demolish and return the existing Tryon Creek plant site to sort of its original characteristics. And alternative residuals management, which you don't know if you want it or not at this point because we don't know what it costs, but it might be nice to get some of those trucks off the road if there's space and if it's economically viable. Again, as I mentioned, off-ramp triggers and compensation structures are there. Project services, again, that's when you would, once you agree to go forward, at that point, you would acquire any sites that are needed for this. So the site acquisition, that would be paid for in part by some of the financing that the project company would bring to that. They'll finalize designs, permitting, construction, commissioning and decommissioning, and then it would go into the operation and maintenance of the facility for 30 years. There are some optional tasks which will be determined at a later date, mostly with regard to residuals management. But again, because we don't know what's in the realm of possibility, they're not included as obligations at this point, but they're going to be seen later on. When we speak of the affordability threshold, so this is pretty wonky, and I'll try to be high level, but happy to answer any questions. So the cities, Portland and Lake Oswego, after doing an analysis of what it would cost to upgrade Tryon Creek and operate it for the next 30 years, came up with a rate structure, to Anthony's point, it's about a 3.9% increase. And within that, they calculated what the revenues would be. Some of the revenues are used for other purposes within the wastewater treatment and residuals management, et cetera. But we were given this, I guess we will call it a schedule of year-on-year available resources for this project. And within this schedule, this is what it would be if you were with Tryon Creek. We have told the developer, EPCOR, you need to give us a solution that falls within this. Now, if you were to issue bonds and do this yourself, you would not fall within this. Why? Because this is the wonkiest looking graphic you've ever seen. If we were doing a graphic form, it's a bell-shaped curve. So it starts very low, goes up in the middle and tapers in the backside, although not completely down. Those first years, they're going to be operating at a net loss because they're going to have financing costs, capital costs, as well as operating costs, as you would be as well. But this allows you to smooth the rate impact to the public. If you did it the other way, it would be, even if it was Tryon Creek, it would be a sharp increase followed by decreases later. So what we said is, let's go ahead and structure this in a way that's going to be best for the ratepayers, a more gradual increase as opposed to sort of a chaotic, volatile thing, and tell the developer, regardless, fit within that. So they're going to be floating some of their payments in the early years, and they're going to be back-ending it in the latter years, which is why we think that pursuing innovative financing plans like WIFIA, which will allow you to defer principal repayment to later years, is going to be really important. EPCOR is coming in with experts in this area. They have financing advisors, et cetera. They're going to structure something that works so that they can meet within this. So, we often say there's private financing involved. It's not just a given that they go to the debt markets and do this themselves. This is actually going to require some pretty creative financial structuring and sculpting in order to minimize the impact on your ratepayers. The amount, however, is very clear. I'm sorry, does somebody have a question?
Councilman.
Yes, hi. I can wait until the end of this. I'm sorry. It would probably be better if I do. I do want to ask questions about the financing of this with regards to Washington's move now to, or proposed move to use dollars for infrastructure and how that might impact our project or the market. But if that's something that can wait to be asked as we go along, I can certainly wait.
I'm happy to answer it. It's a really good question, and I think it's the $1 million question, right? And we're all very excited, or maybe $1 billion, or $1 trillion even is what I hear. So 2.3 trillion to be exact. But so that's a great question, and I think that the easiest way to address it is to say this facility will be owned by Lake Oswego. Any federal money, grant money, federal concessionary loans can be made available for this. It will lower the cost of the project, right? And so with EPCOR, I think what we want to do is look at the total realm of what is possible. WIFIA is a federal credit program. It's a loan program. Love it for these sort of 35 years. You can pay everything back on the last day. But if there's grant money made, and there very well may be, right? That's what we're hoping for. Then it's something I think we would absolutely want to look at. And it basically buys down the project financing cost of this, but I think we can work with EPCOR on that. And that's part of the progressive nature, right? During the progressive period, we can look at that. But to everybody's, to your point, we want to make this as affordable as possible. And this is the affordability threshold. If we can find a way that we can lower this below that and make it even more beneficial to ratepayers, everybody is in the same position to wanting to do that. We've incentivized the process as such.
Great, thank you.
So this is the affordability threshold. Again, as I said, a little bit wonky. There are some exceptions to this that I think that we just want to call out. Performance of demolition work on the existing Tryon Creek facility. We just don't know what that's going to cost because we don't know what the environmental, I don't think so, but if it was all made of asbestos and would require exceptional amounts of effort in terms of demolishing it, then the price could be more than that. And so that's just an area. Likewise, if there's an alternative to the residuals management, we just don't know what that looks at. So that could be outside of this as well. Likewise, there was a assumed price, which is the market base for the site facility. Now, there could be alternative sites that'll be proposed, et cetera, but if it's more than 25% in excess of what that baseline is, that could also be an exception to the affordability threshold. I see another question from Councilor Rath.
Thanks, Jill. So if I understand this affordability threshold, these are the numbers over 30 years, the maximum that the city, Lake Oswego, would pay for the operation of, and creation of the plant, correct?
So it's Lake Oswego and Portland together,
Right.
But yes, it's the.
So, but it's the maximum dollars, right? Is there any ability to restructure these payments per year? Specifically, if the total ceiling is $484 million, that's an average over 30 years of about $16 million a year. Are we able to, if we needed to keep it at 16 each year instead of having, if in the middle years you have a pretty steep increase? Essentially, are there ways for us to kind of maneuver how the amounts we pay or might have to pay to make it maybe more palatable or even it out, based on our budget needs?
So I have to defer to Anthony on this. We were given the schedule, so I didn't actually create it. I do know in the early years, because of other expenditures, there wasn't a lot of additional money to make it 16 million. That's why it's short in those years. I think monies are accounted for in terms
So this is
of
coming
what
from the
it's.
city. Okay.
But I think in the latter years, you're right, there is a bit of flexibility there. That said, I think that's something that we'll probably learn more about as EPCOR gets more details about how they intend to structure it.
Yeah, we fed this information based upon what we would be paying for the existing upgrades, and what we don't want to spec rates, because if we pay more than this, it would impact our ability. We don't have the money to be able to give much more than this combination with Portland. And Portland has a much wider rate base, of course, but they didn't want to unfairly impact other users of City of Portland by putting more money than they would have otherwise towards this Tryon Creek. So once again, this is the combination of what both cities have available under the existing upgrade, and we use that to build this basically.
Okay, thanks, Anthony.
Yeah, I do think one of the advantages of having selected EPCOR as well is that their mothership is a public utility. So they're very good at sculpting rates to minimize the impact. So I think they're very conscious of sort of these sorts of issues. So I would imagine that they're going to come up with some innovative solutions as well that may be able to help ratepayers. So.
One thing I do want to give a caveat to, and maybe something that you were hinting at, Councilor Raff, is towards the back end, there actually is more money available from both Portland and Lake Oswego as compared to the upgrade option. I don't want to disclose how much money we are holding back, but we are, and that's kind of a contingency of sorts for unknowns. And so we wanted to be conservative. So while we are not holding back up front for the first, I would say, 17 years or so, on the back end, we are holding back just to some amounts. And just as to give some assurances on, there is wiggle room on the back end. So.
Thanks, Anthony.
Yeah, and I think some of that additional money may be going towards alternative residuals management and those sorts of things.
Yeah, yes.
Okay, and so I think this is an important slide as well. Minimize my face so that I can see it. So this is a price consideration, and Anthony sort of talked about it a little bit, but I'll just elaborate a little bit more. It's always important to know what your out-of-pocket exposure could be, and so this slide attempts to speak to that. As I mentioned before, the project company is going to be floating the preliminary services periods. That means they're paying for it. You're not paying them on a pay-go basis. they're financing it and doing it at their own risk in many respects. Obviously, if the city decides to proceed with a project after the definitive project submittal, then all of these monies will be just incorporated into the services fee and amortized over basically 30 years. Pursuant to section 5.2 of the preliminary services agreement, though, if the city decides to off-ramp or to terminate during the preliminary services period, there is a compensation amount, and the amount of that depends on the timing of it as well as the trigger. And so if you look on this upper right-hand quadrant of this very busy slide, we have the preliminary services fee. So the maximum fee is $6.9 million for all of the services, which is basically design, development, pricing, financing, and all that kind of stuff. Now, if you were to decide at the basis of design submittal level that you wanted to terminate, the total expense exposure would be $2.7 million. At 30 million, at 30% submittal, it goes up to 4.7, 60 at 6.7, and then definitive submittal would be 6.9. And that makes sense. They're doing more work, they're incurring more costs, et cetera. But that said, it really depends, as I said, in terms of why you decide to terminate. So if you just decide willy-nilly, you know what, we're kind of bored, we don't want to do this anymore, that would be sort of a termination for convenience. And this is where you would pay out the full amount depending on the timing, right? If it's 30 or 60. Termination for cause is hugely important. And this is probably the most important in this. If they were to come to you at the 30 or 60% and say, look, we don't think we can do this anymore within the affordability threshold, that means that they have failed to meet the commitment that they're kind of making in their proposal, that they think that they can do this for the affordability threshold. So then they only get 65% of their costs. That means they're getting deducted 35%. So they lose 35% of their cost. So they're out of pocket. Their incentive is to make this work. And they're going to be, they're going to be sharpening pencils, looking for ways to save things so they can get within the affordability threshold for sure. So termination for cause, if they, likewise, if they just fail to perform their services in an appropriate way, they would get deducted. But this is huge because they're out of pocket. They're paying for this. The ability to withhold and not compensate them 100% incentivizes their performance in a way that is not really probably the way that you typically do this in your contracts. Termination for relief events. So let's say ODEQ just decides to sit on this for 6 years and nobody can move forward, well then that would be at 100%. If you city off-ramp, so if they give you a project definitive submittal that meets all of the requirements, it's within the affordability threshold, ODEQ approvals, all of that kind of stuff, but you change your mind, which you obviously can do at any point in time, then there's a little bit of a premium because they've done everything you asked them to do, but you just sort of change your mind at the 11th hour. So that would be 110% compensation. But this shows you what the different breakage fees are. And these are all clearly defined in both the RFP and the preliminary services agreement. Because of this, the project company is assuming a significant performance risk. This compensation structure is very different. As I said, they're going to be incentivized to be on time because for them, time is money because they're not getting paid as they go, right? So to the city's point of view, the city's going to have to be responsive as well. They're going to have to be able to review things in a timely manner, but it's certainly a different incentive structure than you typically see in these sorts of contracts. Are there any questions on that?
Councilor Booth has a question.
Yes, thank you very much. I'm confused. I think my question is, why would we change our mind? Like when we know that this is very important, or why would it not work? That's like, and when you respond to that question, I want to see about the termination for cause. Why would we pay 65% if the termination does not come from us? So I know maybe in the market, probably Martha can, I am
Jill, you should take the for cause piece and I could take the off ramp piece.
Yeah.
Do you want to go first?
Did you want to?
Yeah, why don't you go first on the list some reasons for cause, and I can talk about what might happen.
Okay, so termination for cause, it's a good good question. So in a traditional contract, obviously, if somebody breaks the terms of that agreement, you don't pay them. You just terminate, right? And maybe you even go after them for penalties. In this case, because you're not paying them as they go, they're actually investing money in products that you own. So you're going to own the designs, you're going to own the permitting studies, you're going to own the geotech studies, all of those sorts of things. But they're putting in their money. So they're out of pocket on that. You can't take 100%. So think of it almost like eminent domain. You can't take property without some fair compensation, right? And so in this case, they've done work that they've given you the proprietary rights to. You're terminating. They're just not getting 100% of their return back. They're getting only 65%. So you're penalizing them by not paying them back full value of what they've done, if that makes sense. Does that make sense?
Yes, but would we be able to use that, like the design and all that? Can we use it after?
Yes. So I probably should have said that. That's a very good point. Preliminary services agreement does allow for you to have the proprietary IP rights and those sorts of things for all the designs that are being developed. So yes.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
So, and I think that the reasons you might off ramp that aren't otherwise the fourth reason, the city off ramp, because I think under A, B, and C, you actually would have a technical reason probably for not proceeding. The last one you might reach because maybe you get significant political opposition from a neighborhood. Maybe you're concerned about the ability to finance future transportation improvements. There could be something else atmospherically that might happen that causes the council to say, no, we no longer think that we want to proceed, that actually doesn't have anything to do with the wastewater treatment plant itself. And that's why we would pay a penalty, is because the chances are if we reached that kind of a decision, it would be because of some kind of factor that was extraneous to this project itself.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Martha.
Yeah, Martha said that very well. We often refer to it as the political risk premium. It really is. People do change their minds, even when it maybe is not in the best interest. But. Okay, any other questions on this? Trust me, I'm almost done, I promise. I hope I'm not boring everybody. So in terms of the preliminary services agreement, I always like to give a snapshot because it's a lengthy document, and we're not going to go with the lawyers through every one of this. I can say that, look, I've been working in infrastructure finance for 30 some odd years. I do this across the globe. The agreement that you have in front of you, preliminary services agreement, reflects best practice for progressive project development. So there's progressive design build, which some of you may be familiar with, which is a very standardized project. And so this has many of the same provisions of a progressive design build, but then adds in progressive financing as well as the operation and maintenance on the backside. We have a term sheet for the project agreement. So key elements of that are also included, so we don't have to return to negotiating that. It's very detailed. To your point about Section 7, delivery, ownership, and use of documentation. So you own, the city owns all of the deliverables. You get intellectual property rights. There are also provisions for assignment, dispute resolution, et cetera. A lot of this is done through the appendices, which detail the work schedule, the actual submission requirements. So for every submission, we're going to know exactly what they need to provide. So it's a pretty standard contract in terms of what we've seen. I congratulate the lawyers for putting it together in really clear terms. And obviously it incorporates now the key provisions of the EPCOR proposal, which was the winning proposal. I can certainly talk through all of these issues. I think I've already kind of done it at a high level. Obviously, the scope of services we've talked about, compensation structure for preliminary services I talked about, term and termination. The contract begins when the council allows it to be signed and terminates upon a decision by the council in terms of proceeding or not proceeding in the off-ramp, or earlier if there's a termination. You can see in 5.2, we have all the termination and off-ramp provisions. The project company can also opt to terminate for cause if the city just sort of abandons it. Obligations upon termination are the payment structures that we've laid out. And the appendices are really where a lot of the brunt of this is in terms of minimum qualification, minimum requirements, outfall investigation scope, geotech scope, site survey scope, compensation just really lists all the different fees, the work schedule. EPCOR did, and I think they have a slide coming up, an incredibly detailed work schedule, which gives us a lot of comfort. Their insurance requirements as well, obviously, and indemnification so that you're protected, et cetera. So it's a pretty clean agreement. I'm sure Evan can speak to the specifics of it better than I can, but I just wanted to let you know that clearly established, and as I mentioned before, there was not an ex post negotiation of these terms. There was some cleaning up of the language, but the key provisions have been provided to all of the bidders, and the bidders made comments, some of which were accepted, some were not, and the ultimate project agreement was, or preliminary services agreement was included as part of the submittal for the proposals. Some final thoughts on this, just in general. Again, this process was designed from day one to minimize your risks and defer decision making until you have good information, right? The idea of making a fully informed decision, there's a lot. But as we know, as you go forward at 30, 60%, you're going to get better information. And if you decide that this is not the way forward or it's not going to work, you have the opportunity to off-ramp. So you're not making a decision for 30 years today. You're really making a decision up until the BOD decision, or I guess in a couple of weeks, you're making a decision up until the BOD where you have the opportunity to revisit this. The off-ramp and the termination provisions, as I mentioned before, allow you to opt out of the project if it exceeds the affordability threshold or otherwise fails to offer anticipated benefits, right? So if it goes from a 6 acre footprint, so it goes from 12, we're expecting 6 or so, and if it goes to 24, obviously that might be a reason for you to say, I don't want to proceed with this project, right? Or if they want to put a huge, smelly smoke stack in the middle of it, that might be another reason why you opt out of this as well. So there are plenty of opportunities for you to look at that. There is significant transfer of pricing risk to the project company during both the preliminary services agreement as well as the project agreement. They're capped. They can't go above what they've bid. They're out of pocket on this. They're going to be absolutely incentivized to meet schedule and all of those other things. And I would say, again, having done this for 30 some odd years, watching the process, you got some good proposals, and you were, I would say the EPCOR proposal was about as good as I've seen in terms of meeting sort of those compass points that we had laid out in the RFP and even in the RFQ, fully fleshed out. I have absolute confidence in EPCOR. Having known them in the industry, I don't work with them or anything like that, but knowing their reputation as delivering, I think that it's a best-in-class partner, world-renowned, and I think that if you decide to move forward with this, you're in good hands with EPCOR. So I'll pause there if there are any questions, and I apologize for being so long-winded.
Councilor Mans.
Thank you. I don't want to belabor the point of the WIFIA loan, but it does seem to be an important aspect of the financing. Have you, Jill, in your experience, seen that if a region, say Pacific Northwest, Oregon, has recently received a large WIFIA loan, that would preclude another one happening? I know Portland just back in March was awarded, a $700 million loan for water. So would this take away or add?
So I don't think the geographic location is really what is it's not really determining the pecking order. So they have a list of criteria. They're looking for diversity of project types, diversity of clean water impacts, and those sorts of things. I think this project will score well in terms of what it's aiming to do. Likewise, because it's innovative, the EPA folks at WIFIA are they're looking for examples and projects that can be a demonstration project. They also do, I mean, Tiffy is the same way. Tiffy and WIFIA, they tend to look favorably upon those that are also blending with private financing and innovative financial structures. So I think that this would possibly score well, but you never know. I think that one of the good things is that you'll have a partner that on their team, they have experts in the WIFIA application process. I think some of them even helped write some of the legislation. I work with those guys as well at EPA. But you just never know what they're thinking. And I think that EPCOR has brought in the right professionals to help them sort of navigate this. But I think collectively, the city as well as EPCOR, collectively all need to work really hard in terms of making this a go for WIFIA. Because I agree with you. I think it would be a great thing for this project.
Great. Thank you so much for going into the weeds for me a bit.
My pleasure. So if there are no more questions, I think I am on deck to transfer this over to Lee Ward of EPCOR. Lee, are you ready?
Yes, Jill, thank you.
I need to figure out how to unshare. So give me 1 second for technological limitations that I have. So that...
No, that's good. I just got the message. I can't share while somebody else is sharing.
I was not good as a child in terms of sharing. My mother would be very disappointed with me right now. So I will, you can now share and I will go quiet. Thank you all.
All right, let's see if we can, there we go. All right, well, good afternoon, Mayor and members of council. Thank you for the opportunity to come and be part of your meeting today. Provide you a little bit of background and on EPCOR and our solution and our approach to the project. So we're very excited. We have been following the project, not as long as Jill, but for a very long time. I got to say, you know, some of the comments earlier about the process and it being clear and laid out nicely. You know, sometimes we get a lot of challenges when we compete on these different projects. I would say that this is probably the documents were as clear as they could have been. It really helped us to give you the best proposal we could give you. So I want to recognize that and say thank you for that. So you might not know much about EPCOR. EPCOR, actually, we've been in business for about 125 years. We did, as Jill mentioned, start out as a city water and electric utility. And in 1996, EPCOR actually split away from the city of Edmonton. We became a municipal corporation. And we were all of a sudden asked to go out and compete outside of our city for the same type of work we did inside our city. So we're a bit of a strange animal. We run regulated water utilities in the United States and Canada, and we run contract water utilities as well. And so, you know, that gives us, I think the nice thing about that has been that EPCOR is exposed to many geographies, many types of treatment technologies. We know what works and doesn't work. We run over 60 water and wastewater plants through the different areas we work in. I think all of that helped us in coming forward with the solutions that we thought were going to fit with Lake Oswego's needs. So we do compete in other areas, even though you see the 4 highlighted provinces in Canada and the 3 states in the United States. Obviously, we do look at projects in other areas, and some of the projects we like to pursue are P3 projects. And so when your project came out, it was right up our alley. And so even though Oregon isn't highlighted, we hope that it someday will be. So the EPCOR team, so on any P3 project, and this is a progressive P3, so we're going to work through the upfront part like Jill has explained. But on any P3 project, EPCOR doesn't provide all aspects of the project. So we are a little different in that we do act as the project company. So we lead the project. And we are the financier, so we do provide the financing or arrange financing, come up with different financing schemes based on the needs of the project. And the biggest thing for us is we are also the operator. And so as a project company, you don't always think about the 30-year life cycle as much as you probably should. But as an operator, we certainly do. We're going to be stuck with the plant at the end of the day, and stuck with the commitments that we need to make to you contractually. And so we're always thinking right from day one how this thing is going to operate for that 30 years. We have brought on the team, the design build subcontractor, who was part of our team to do the largest wastewater P3 in Canada. So they're here to be part of the team. We've added Filance, who is an American firm do a lot of work in California. So they are very key to the team. And as well, we've added Wood as our lead design firm to do the engineering and design work. And so the contractual relationship is kind of as it's shown, where the design builder reports to EPCOR, and then the design firm reports directly to the design build subcontractor. As you can see if you look to the top left, you'll see the financing member is EPCOR, but we have brought on an expert in WIFIA who's going to work with us through the financing and try to optimize what we can do with grants and loans. If you look to the project company box, you'll see that to the right of the project company box, we have actually added a local firm to help us with the land use issues that hopefully we'll have to engage in purchasing a piece of land to put our plant on. We also have added a local architect who's very familiar with Lake Oswego, and a surveying company that does work for Lake Oswego as well. So we did look for some local content to help us out with understanding Lake Oswego and their particular needs. We also, in this case, which we don't always do, brought on the technology providers to work with us very closely through the proposal. So both options that we have presented in our proposal are actually represented, and we work closely with them. We wanted to do the sizing of the basins at a conceptual level, but just to make sure that what we're presenting to you can actually meet that small footprint that we're trying to achieve. So we're a less complicated team than a lot of different P3 teams in that EPCOR is the financier and the operator, but it all works pretty well, and we're happy to be involved in this pursuit. Jill went over the city drivers with you, and I just want to emphasize that basically we started out by looking at the challenge of the facility footprint. It's a very small footprint, and to make sure that we could actually fit all the facilities on that footprint that we can do. The plant had to be robust and reliable, especially with your wet weather flows that you get in Portland. We know that can happen very quickly. We've got to be able to deal with that. And then we've got to make sure that we're bringing proven treatment processes, that DEQ is actually going to approve. And so both of the technologies we've brought do have a track record in that regard. And providing value for money is a big one. I think Jill mentioned that, us being a city utility in many areas, we do rates analysis, and we deal with ratepayers directly. And so in this case, those ratepayers are yours, but we certainly understand the need to, keep those rates manageable for your ratepayers. When the first thing we did when we started out was we, as I said, did the sizing of the basins. We wanted to make sure that we could fit on the site. And the time that the site is most congested is actually during the construction. And so we actually looked at the staging plans to see if we have room for our contractors and all of the things they need to do while working with the site and building the facilities. So we did that actually for the Aqua Narita option, and then we did it for the membrane bioreactor option. And so these sizes that you see here are conceptual, they're conceptual sizing, but you know, we feel pretty confident that, you know, once we work through the details and bring it to a 30 and a 60% design, that we're going to be able to meet that site requirement. The other, one of the other things that Jill mentioned was the sensitivity of the site. You know, I've been down and when we did the walk through the plant before the RFQ, the existing plant, we walked through your river valley and the park that was there. And, you know, we really understand the sensitivity of the location that we're working in. I think the idea to free up all of the land that the existing plant is on is just a great idea, and if we can be part of that, then that's what we'd like to do. So we've looked at how can we make this this treatment plant not look like a wastewater treatment plant, and so that's what we've attempted to do. This is just one concept that we've worked through to date, but I think it does give an idea of sort of what the site itself can look like and how it might blend into the surrounding area. I think, you know, we looked at different options, but, you know, this was one of the ones that we really liked and put forward. This is not cast in stone. This has to be, we have to work with you, our partners, over the next year to, you know, confirm some of these things and maybe change some and tweak some things. But, you know, it's one possible outcome. So I think it, you know, it actually fits in nicely. Now, the other thing is, along with the aesthetics, is the odor and the noise. Those are all typical issues at wastewater treatment plants. We're going to have to deal with those appropriately and make sure that, you know, those don't come to bear, if you will. We don't want to be noticed in the river valley, and that would be the best outcome. As Jill mentioned, the schedule that we've put together is an aggressive schedule. One of the things we didn't want to do, because time is money, we wanted to try to get through this as quickly as we could, and we've condensed the schedule as much as we reasonably think is possible. And it doesn't show here. This is just the preliminary services part of the schedule, but if we can stick to the schedule, if everything should proceed as we have looked at it, you know, through the RFP period, then it is possible to have a plant on site and done by 2024. So again, a very tight timeline, very aggressive, but and we're going to need the city's help to make it through this, because the city has some review periods that that are built into the schedule. But we think that it's possible and doable for sure. One of the things we did come forward with 2 technologies, and the reason we did that is, you know, we wanted to make sure that we would have an option at the end of the day to proceed. However, one of the technologies we've brought forward is a little newer to North America. But as you can see here in Global Water Intelligence, one of the most respected sources for news in the water industry, this technology, Aqua Narita, was voted as the #1 breakthrough technology of the decade. It's really coming to the fore now across the world, and now across North America. If you look at the top left chart, you'll see that when we looked at what technologies could actually fit the footprint, you know, there are many wastewater technologies, and depending on your wastewater source, the type of wastewater you have, whether there's heavy industrial influence or whether it's more municipal wastewater, there are different ways to treat that wastewater to meet the permit conditions that you're going to be required to meet. When you look at all of the possible technology options, we narrowed it down to membrane bioreactor and aqua narita. As you can see from the chart, if you look at BNR as being the largest footprint, well, compared to that, MBR and aqua narita are actually a quarter of that size, a quarter of that footprint. So that helped us in our decision making. The bottom left chart actually, kind of compares the 6 different options from an energy point of view. One of the issues with membrane bioreactor is that it's an energy hog. There are many pumps and blowers that are required for the MBR plant. And if you compare it to all the technologies, it actually is the largest power user, electric user, across, when you compare it per megaliter of wastewater, or per million gallons per day of wastewater. Aqua narita, on the other hand, is actually only 40%, uses 40% of that same compared to the power usage of MBR. So that was a big factor in pursuing aqua narita as well. And then if you look at the chart on the right, it's very interesting what this shows, but for a long time, membrane bioreactor was the way to go if you wanted to meet certain permit limits. And it was getting tougher and tougher to, the regulations across North America were getting tougher and tougher, across the world, actually. But you'll see that membrane bioreactor actually, the installations of that actually peaked in around 2009 and actually have started to drop, closer to 2020. So we also were very cognizant that we don't want to put an outdated solution into Lake Oswego. We want to make sure that we're looking at both options and making the right choice as we work through the details. This is one of the plants that is actually built in the Netherlands. And the reason we actually looked at and chose this plant is because it sort of looks like it's a flow that's a little larger than Lake Oswego's, but the parameters that you're going to have to meet on your permit are pretty similar. This is a very, this plant is in a very industrial area of the Netherlands. It's not trying to obviously blend into the river valley. So we don't want to look at this from an aesthetics point of view, but from a performance point of view, this plant really meets all of the requirements, that we see here. Just to give you some background, EPCOR actually began its due diligence of aqua narita about 3 years ago. There was a project in Canada for a wastewater treatment plant, a P3 project that was coming up. The existing plant consisted of sequence batch reactors. We had looked at the possibility of converting those to aqua narita. We didn't get to a conclusion on that because the project was abandoned because of funding issues. So when the Lake Oswego project arose, we actually picked up where we had left off, and we were invited to Rockford, Illinois, to operate the demonstration plant that aqua narita has built there. We operated it for a week and made all the decisions on the operations, so we got a good feel for how the plant performed. We called upon our wastewater experts across EPCOR to come together, evaluate the data that was available, to look at how the plants performed and how they compared when you looked at their ability to meet permit. So through that process, we became very satisfied that aqua narita was really a viable option. Across the world, aqua narita has been very accepted and has grown a lot. As you can see, these different locations. It is becoming the plant of choice because of different reasons. So Aqua Narita compares to MBR from a capital cost point of view. It's a little lower. But where it really shines is the operating costs and the life cycle costs and replacement of equipment and repair of equipment. It's a lot lower. And so when we started looking at all that, we just, again, became convinced that, that this is a very viable solution. We also, in our discussions with Aqua Narita, became aware that besides these plants that are now coming into operation, they are actually working on permitting for some plants in Pennsylvania and in Michigan. Those plants, those states rather, use the 10-state standard to kind of define the requirements for wastewater treatment. And so they're going through the permitting process with those states right now, and there's no problems. They're being accepted. It's interesting, we found out recently that Oregon actually uses the 10-state standard itself, even though it's not officially part of the 10-state standard. That's the basis for their decision-making around what's approved and what's not. So as I said, Aqua Narita is established around the world. It's just gaining its foothold in North America now. The biggest step forward for it in the last year has been the completion of the plant in Alabama, which is shown in the second row. And in a few days, there's actually going to be a seminar, an e-seminar, where the manager of the Alabama plant is actually part of that seminar for Aqua Narita. And he's going to talk about the performance of his plant over the past year and its ability to meet permit. So again, we're feeling fairly confident. I know, Mayor, you asked the question about, how do you feel about going through a 2-year process with DEQ? And what's the likelihood of it being approved? We're feeling pretty good about it. We think there's every possibility that it is going to be approved. So, I think, again, the other thing I wanted to add here is anecdotally, and it's not been announced officially yet, but there is a major city in Canada that's actually going to convert one of their clarifiers to an Aqua Narita process. So again, we're not feeling like this is something that we're taking a flyer on. We're very convinced that this is a viable solution, and we want to bring the best solution we can to Lake Oswego, and we think that this just might be it. So thank you very much for the opportunity. Really appreciate it. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to take them.
Thank you, sir. Councilor Rapp.
Thanks, Mayor. Lee, great presentation, really appreciate it. As I'm sure you may have heard, those of us in Lake Oswego like to think and prefer to lead most things in the Portland metro area. We like to be the leader, first in creating new things and trying new things. We have an opportunity here with the new wastewater treatment plant to get creative around sustainability. Some of the things I've seen in my various Netflix nights with my wife and watching news articles about what other countries are doing, there's some interesting things that other countries are doing around creative, sustainable ways of using kind of the byproducts of a wastewater treatment plant. So the methane, some of the other non-describable factors of it. Does EPCOR have any experience developing treatment plants that have used things like this that we can do ourselves? Yes, we have a small footprint, but I still think we would be remiss if we didn't try to consider really creative ways of using some of these things in a creative and sustainable way.
Great question, Councilor Raff. In Edmonton, where we have our largest wastewater treatment plant, we actually have added on a membrane process at the end where we treat the water to such a level that we actually send it down the river 2 miles to a refinery for them to use it as reuse water. So that's one example. At that same wastewater treatment plant, I'm actually currently working on a project to bring renewable natural gas to the facility. So we want to quit burning the biogas and just burning it off and wasting it to atmosphere. We want to capture that, and we want to inject it into the local gas utilities infrastructure and create renewable natural gas.
That's terrific.
The other things that have happened, so in one of our smaller communities that we work in, we actually do composting. So we take the biosolids, we actually work them through with air and wood chips and create composting that the town uses for its parks and that sort of thing. So yes, we definitely have been involved in sustainable type of ventures.
Yeah.
Just recently at our water treatment plant in Edmonton, we have decided to add solar power to replace the needs off the electric grid. And so we're looking at that now. So yes, we take sustainability very seriously at EPCOR. And it is something that we actually brought up in the meetings the early meetings that we had with staff. We'll have to look at as Jill says, when we look at the alternative study, that will be an opportunity for us to look at how do we reuse all of those byproducts from the wastewater treatment plant.
Great, thank you. So I guess, then my follow-up would be to our team here, which is when we get to that place where we're starting to design, let's really be creative and bold with how we design this, because again, who doesn't want Lake Oswego to lead in this? And it'd be a great show of what we're capable of doing and kind of our progressive kind of further thinking. So if we could do it all, let's do as much as we can. Thank you, Lee.
You're welcome.
Councillor Wendland.
Yeah, I've got a couple questions on the design. I know we're on a footprint that's pretty tight. If 20 years from now, DEQ has some new thing that they want to control, that you have to add another process or another link to the plant in order to process that, do we have space to accommodate, and it's hard to predict how much space you'd need, but do we have flexibility with respect to adding possible new requirements onto the plant moving to the future?
Understand your question. Good question. So the Aqua Narita process that we're doing actually, there's a couple ways to improve upon, I guess, and to push more through the plant. So we have tertiary filters at the end, and by adding different chemicals, you can actually increase the phosphorus removal limit. We don't want to use chemicals. We'd rather you do it biologically. But that is one way of improving the amount of phosphorus you can remove from the wastewater. And then the other thing with the biology that's introduced from Aqua Narita, it's the sludge makeup. It's how the sludge is made up. It's made up of granules. And I think the density of those granules in the wastewater tank can be increased to a certain point, again, to increase the treatment performance and the amount of flow that you can put through the plant. One of the other things that is possible right now, one of the benefits of Aqua Narita is we're putting the entire wet weather flow through through the Aqua Narita basins. Nothing is bypassed; it all goes through. If it became necessary, one of the things you could do is you could actually bypass some of the wet weather flow and blend it at the end so that you're meeting your permit, and then you could relieve your basins of that flow. So there are some ways to maximize what we can do and optimize what we can do with Aqua Narita if that became necessary in future.
And then at the end of the day, the mayor gets to drink the water when we open the plant, right? So everything will be on. That's the best part of being the mayor, is you get to test the water. Is that correct?
Different kind of plant.
Now, Councillor Wendland, he's trying to make me drink it. He's trying to make you drink it. I want to see his cup.
One thing I'll
We'll
add,
drink together. We'll drink together.
one thing I'll add is that, at the end of this, we will own the property, the 12.4 acres. We could, theoretically, we could shave off a small sliver of it for a future build out if we wanted to. I guess it's within our discretion because it is our property, but I don't want to promise. I don't know that we want to keep as much as we can. So I think as Lee went over, there's solutions on site, but that is a potential. It is.
Councillor Mance.
Yes, hi, thanks. Great presentation. I'm just going to tag on with what my colleagues asked. It sounds as if with this technology, which honestly, after these years, you'd think I would understand perfectly, but I don't, there would be a technological ability to add on if there were improvements of technology in the future. To everyone's point, if, for example, microplastics become something that are considered in permitting, would it be possible to add on, or would this require going in and completely rebuilding the plant or retooling the equipment?
Well, it's hard to know, how far out we're looking. If we just look at Aqua Narita, they've built on an existing wastewater treatment platform and just changed the sludge characteristics.
Right.
And so, I would just not rule out that there are going to be advances in biological treatment, and that sort of thing. So I would never rule that out. There are certainly things we can do to maximize, as I said, or to optimize the flow through the plant today with what we know, but I just can't even guess what might be going on 10 years from now. So.
Got it. Yeah, a little science fiction-y there, but I thought I'd ask it in the spirit. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Councillor Berta.
Yes, I just a couple things. I want to reiterate Councillor Rath and there's the importance of making this entire process as sustainable and energy efficient as possible. So I think we really want to be innovative and make sure we look out for the environment short and long term. So that's very important, I think, to most of this council. Also, I have just some, and I don't know that we can answer this because I know this might be more in the future, but I do have some concerns about the process of demolition and also the soil that we might find and any cleanup that's going to have to be required of the site and the impacts that might have on costs. So that's a concern of mine as well. And again, those might be unknowns that we really can't even address at this time. And then I guess my final concern is just making sure that we build anything that can, handle if we do have flooding in the area, because we did have the big floods of '96. And with climate change, unfortunately, I think we're probably going to see those more often than less often, to make sure that we have something that's going to be able to continue running and operating even during disasters.
I can address the last one first, if I can. One of the specification actually outlined that we have to build certain infrastructure above certain flood limits. And so that is understood and an expectation. We know that that's a floodplain. And so that's been outlined in the spec, and we'll have to meet that. As far as the remediation of the existing site, just can't even sort of guess how that might look after 40 years of operation, 50 years of operation. It's one of the things we will be looking at and trying to determine to give a better insight to the city.
Yeah, we've included it as an alternate bid, basically asking them to do all the work to figure out as much information as they can on that and what the cost is and all those sort of things, so that when we actually get to that point a year from now, when we're making the decision on whether to ultimately move forward to the next phase, we know what those costs are to the best of our ability.
Thank you. Councilor Winland.
So along those lines, we have in the proposal that Portland is off the hook if we sign the agreement. Is that correct for any environmental issues? Is that, I mean, Anthony or Martha or Evan?
Evan, maybe.
I mean, it says in the agreement that
yes,
we basically. So I have a few concerns that they've been the operator for 55 years, and I know it's sewer, and I'm hoping that we process it correctly, but I don't want to have a $50 million cleanup project that we're stuck with, and I don't know how you get around that.
well,
Oh, go ahead.
well, I was just going to say, I mean, that's part of the testing that's going to be done to identify what is the status of the soils. I mean, we think it's a viable source.
Well, and let me add to that, because a key point is that we're actually going to have another intergovernmental agreement with Portland that's going to come at the project development stage a year from now. And we will know the information because we have developed it before we actually enter into it. So all that will need to be part of that discussion when we get to that point. And right now we do have an understanding that they're giving it to us for $1 with the idea that we take care of all of that. But once again, when we have more information, we can really fully flesh that out, what that looks like.
Right, but I guess yeah, okay, perfect. Because my follow-up question to that is okay, so then we find it, then what does DEQ do to us if we all of a sudden find that we're sitting on a tank of whatever, kryptonite? I mean,
well,
then you have to deal with it because you know about it, right? I mean,
well, I guess I would say you have to deal about it in a way permissible under the codes, and it all depends what we plan to do with the property. You've got 12 acres that may come to the city. Are you going to be digging down in order to put in garages, or are you going to be basically capping it to use it as parkland? I mean,
So you'd enter into an agreement with DEQ about the cleanup level,
right?
And,
depending upon your level of development. I'm sorry,
yeah.
Mr. City Manager.
It's okay. And it would govern, actually, more importantly, it would govern our ability to transfer it to a third party. Local governments,
right.
Actually, it's very easy for us to hang on to contaminated property. It's very difficult for us to sell it.
Okay, and then is there risk involved with DEQ giving us a permit in the flood zone? I mean, I know that they gave it to us before, but things have changed and things have been updated. And I guess my question is, do we run a risk having not going to the EBCOR solution with the new plant by putting more, well, I guess it would be Portland's problem because they would still own the plant, but DEQ, but it's our problem because we couldn't flush because they wouldn't give us a permit, right? So we couldn't use it. So my question is there risk in them not issuing a permit and saying, hey, you guys have to find a different solution because you are in a floodplain and that's a new requirement that you would have? Or do you think that's an issue?
So I can ask one of my team to answer that, Corolla, but let me start with part of what we're building is actually not in the worst parts of the floodplain. Actually, its elevation is higher than it is currently in an existing plant. There's actually a big topography difference on two of the properties where the administrative building, the headworks will go, which is on the 1996 flood didn't get to them, for example, because it's higher up. And then as Lee said, we have to mitigate as part of the project, the other property as part of it so that it doesn't have the same flood risk. But to your specific question, with all that said, Kyle or Dan or Lee, anybody can answer that?
Yeah, so I'm not sure I fully understand the question. If you're talking about the existing, you want to go ahead, Counselor? I'm sorry.
Well, yeah, well, I guess I'm saying, I don't think we have if there's risk in keeping the plant as it is, where it is, and just investing more money into it, we could run the risk of DEQ. I'm asking if there's any risk from DEQ's standpoint by having that in a floodplain, and which gives us even more incentive to build a new plant, I guess is what I'm saying. So
I
if
guess
that makes sense.
I'll give my opinion on that. I don't think that you would be prevented from continuing to expand Tryon and do the improvements necessary at Tryon to keep treating flow there with respect to floodplain. Now, maybe expanding your basins and your walls might need to be higher than the 100-year or the 500-year floodplain, but that's money. There's cost in doing it. In doing that, but I don't think you're going to be prevented from continuing to expand on Tryon. Does that address your question?
Yeah, I'm looking at mitigating risk of decision making. So
Yeah.
if we've got a risk of putting a lot of money into the old plant and then not having it approved or have a big risk factor there that's going to cost us a ton of money to mitigate the risk, then it's even more expensive to keep your old car than it is to buy the new one.
So, yeah, my thought on that is that's a much lower risk with respect to DEQ from a permitting standpoint. And I don't know, Lee may have thoughts on that also from EPCOR standpoint. But yeah, that's my thought on that.
Well, I would agree with you, Dan. I think that's how we view it as well.
Thank you, Councilor Rapp.
First, I think we should all applaud Anthony for his unbelievably strong negotiating skills for getting all this land for $1. And I would like to nominate Anthony to do all our fire department negotiations going forward. So good job, Anthony. In all seriousness, and this is probably a very dumb question, Lee, so bear with me, but I'm assuming between the building of the new plant and the demo of the old plant there, how does you manage any disruption of service? But I'm assuming you're not demoing the old plant until the new plant's up and running. Is that how it goes?
That's exactly right. So we've had actually lots of experience in building new plants or new parts of plants and having to switch over from the old plants. It does take a lot of work and coordination with the contractor, with the design builder, and operations. We have the luxury in this case of not having to. We can build a new plant while the old plant keeps running. It's really when we start to tie in the influent lines and direct the wastewater to our plant that there will have to be some careful planning to be able to do that. But it's not anything we haven't done previously, and it just takes a lot of coordination and effort.
Well, from the presentation you gave, it sounds like EPCOR has quite a bit of experience and skill set. So I don't think there's any question in my mind that your teams have wanted to do it. So appreciate it.
Thank you.
Counselor, if you don't mind me adding on, this is Dan with Carollo. We did have some initial conversations earlier with DEQ, and that's going to be a very important part of the discussions that are going to have to occur with DEQ with respect to thinking about that transfer of permit, how it occurs, what the transition is going to look like. Additionally, EPCOR has suggested the potential that their staff might look into helping out with operations with Tryon. So there'll be a lot of thought given to that early on.
Yeah, one of the things we like to do, if we were going in and replacing a part of the plant or building a new plant, ideally we would be able to be in charge of the operation of the existing plant, so that we can help to make the decisions around tie-ins and taking process units out and putting other ones on. It really helps if we sort of have some control over that. But if we have the ability to work with the city of Portland, and I'm sure that will happen, and be able to just direct some of that traffic, I think we can manage through that for sure.
Yeah, if I just jump in with a question here for Lee. What is EPCOR's biggest risk in this project?
Well, that's a good question. So I think for us, we're very satisfied that, first of all, the delivery method and the transfer of risk, I think that's, everybody was right. It went fairly smoothly with the contract terms and that sort of thing. But one thing we're very in tune with is the transfer of risk that's expected of us in this type of transaction. So we didn't have a lot of comments on the agreement because we're pretty comfortable with those things. I guess the biggest thing for me, the permitting is always one of the biggest risks. You know, how do we get DEQ on side? Well, we start early. You know, I do have some information that DEQ is quite familiar with Aqua Narita and has been exposed to it, and has been asking questions of Aqua Narita. So I believe that you know, always permitting is one of your biggest issues. The other one will be, it won't be easy. The transfer of wastewater from the existing plant to the new plant and moving that, you know, there's 6 different lines that provide wastewater to the plant. And all of those have got to be relocated in some manner to tie into the new plant. So that's going to be a critical part of things. So I think it's those kinds of things that, Mr. Mayor, that I would worry about.
Thank you for that. So what if Aqua Narita, for whatever reason, ends up not working out, it's not permitted? What does using the membrane technology, the other method, what would that do to the cost threshold?
Well, at the early stage we're in, and this is a conceptual stage, we haven't worked through all of the details yet, and we'd have to look at ways to mitigate. But right now, you know, we're thinking that it's challenged to meet the cost affordability. You know, when we did develop financial models and looked at this closely, and we're not to the point where we'd absolutely say no, it can't meet it, but it's not looking good at this point, using preliminary conceptual kind of numbers.
So Aqua Narita is really,
it is the way to go, I think, and not only from a cost point of view. And you know, I'd go out on a limb and say I'm pretty sure you can meet your affordability with Aqua Narita. But just from you know, some of the other comments with the councillors who would like to be sort of ahead of the game and sort of leading edge, and Lake Oswego wants to be a leader rather than a follower. I just think that this technology is going to gain more and more and more momentum in the United States, and that I think you want to be on that train.
If your work, if it takes longer than expected, longer than, you know, January of 2022, I mean, this might be a question for Anthony. But what does that put us into any kind of particular situation with DEQ in the current permit if the timeline is prolonged?
We don't hold the permit. The city of Portland holds the permit.
Does it put Portland in a?
Yeah, my understanding is that they're aware that we're working through this and that they're giving us some grace to work through it. So I think that's where we're at right now. But Kyle or Dan or Erica, please correct me if I'm wrong.
Typically, from our experience, we do see that the regulators, if they see that you're on a path and you're actually working towards a solution, they'll grant you more time and some more leniency in most cases.
I would agree with that. This is Kyle. I would agree with that statement. Also, in particular, well, in general, I definitely agree with that statement, and in particular with DEQ, with my experiences with the DBO project in Wilsonville. You know, DEQ wants to see you moving forward, and I think that's really the key. Sorry, Dan and Stephanie.
No, it's okay. And I would just share that DEQ is behind on getting permits across the state permitted. So with respect to trying out getting permitted in that timeline, I don't see that as being significantly detrimental to the process, Mayor.
Thank you. Thanks for answering those questions,
And
Councilor.
also, sorry, one more thing. This is Kyle again. And that 24-month timeline came directly from a conversation with DEQ. That isn't a placeholder.
Okay, thank you. Hey, Councilor Winley.
Well, I just want to say, I came into this process a few months ago, and I have to compliment Anthony Hooper and and Jill and Dan and Erica, Kyle, everybody that has been involved in this process. I nearly choked when we had to say, oh, we need to spend a big chunk of money to even get a bid. And I will tell you that it was the best investment that we could possibly have done. Every penny has been well spent. We've had experts that have weighed in, and I will say that if you want some pleasure reading, which I went through the two proposals, those reports and the packets, in a couple cases they had to go in like 3 different emails because they were so big. And I will tell you, Lee with EPCOR and the other firm that bid did a fabulous job. We had good choices. EPCOR, you came out higher, and I think from my level, even though I'm not an engineer and I'm not a water expert, I think our process has been exceptional. I think our horsepower has been absolutely wonderful. And I just want to congratulate the team and thank you for all your help, because it's been a long process. And a lot of you, you probably had 2 or 3 kids by now and grandchildren since we started this process. I mean, it's been a long, and it hasn't even started yet, but I think we're in a great position to move forward. And I think we've got the foundation that's necessary to make really good decisions. And I applaud the team for getting us in this position, because it's not easy. And if you do go through the whole packet of what all the situations that we go through as a council, we only know a little part of it. And we're going to have to be making some really sound decisions. The team that's on the screen right now, they know the 10-foot depth level of this, and just talking to everybody and sitting through the meetings, they feel comfortable with our direction. And Lee, EPCOR made a great presentation. I think all the financials, everything kind of melded together so that we're in a good position. So read through your information. Anthony's a wealth of information, as is anyone else on the team, but and I'm available if you need questions. I won't be able to answer technical things, but I can at least walk you through some of the processes that we came to the decision. But I just wanted to throw that in there to say I'm very impressed with our team, and I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart, because this is a 50, 60-year decision, folks. So this is probably our biggest decision as a council that we'll get to make. We want to get it right. So anyway, I'll stop talking. No pressure.
We appreciate your involvement in this project, and when it comes to crappy conversations, I couldn't imagine anyone better. Thank you. We've learned so much from all of you on the project team today. There's only one thing I feel like we can teach to you, and that is that we pronounce it Lake Oswego. We will.
Very good. That's great to know.
Well, thank you all very much. Colleagues, really appreciate all of your questions. This is a weighty issue, one of the biggest decisions that we'll have to make in this coming time. And we appreciate you all taking the time to make sure that we're informed. And I think we all look forward to continuing the conversation and the work together as a team as we go forward. And does anyone else have any further questions? Anthony, Martha, anything further?
Just like to say, EPCOR is extremely excited about the opportunity. And, we often on these projects, you sort of gauge the client you're working with, and are they going to be a good partner for us? As much as you look at a good partner for you, we look at good partners. We really feel comfortable with Lake Oswego as a partner, and we're very excited about the opportunity. So thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, sir.
I just want to reiterate that I feel like this project is, to reiterate what Councilor Wendland said, it's set up in a really great position. And I feel that and Jill, maybe speak to this a little bit too, is that this could be a project that can be replicated across the U.S. if it's successful, because this is an innovative project that I think I think it's going to be really neat for Lake Oswego. And once again, we're going to work collaboratively. We're going to problem solve, and I'm confident that this team that is assembled can work through anything.
Yeah, I think that's an important point. I said at the beginning, America's at a crossroads. Investing in Jurassic era technologies or looking to the future. And obviously this council is forward looking and looking for better solutions, more energy efficiency, environmentally, better environmental stewardship, et cetera. And I think this process and this project itself is particularly well suited for that. And the ability to recover important waterfront property, whether you use it for park or redevelopment, that's a decision to be made another day. I mean, that's also an important part of, I think, the future. So I think it's a great, I've been doing this for 30 years and I applaud you all. Great questions. It's been transparent process, competitive process. I think that EPCOR and the city of Lake Oswego are perfect partners for this. And I expect nothing but success from the outcome of this project. So congratulations.
Thanks, Jill. Thanks for your leadership.
Okay. Thank you all very much. If there's nothing further, we are now